Welcome back to the Jeff Crilley Show. I'm very excited about my next guest because he is a world-renowned selling expert. He's the author of several best-selling books, including The Relationship Edge and Stop Acting Like a Seller and Start Thinking Like a Buyer. Jerry Acuff is my guest. Welcome to the Jeff Crilley Show.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
Well, what fascinates me about you is that you confess you're an introvert. So how does an introvert become one of the leading sales gurus on the planet?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention. And so when you're, when you're 27 years old and you can't find a job, and your college roommate calls you and asks you if you want a job in the pharmaceutical business, you say yes because you would have said yes to selling, boxes on the corner. And so I got a job in sales, and I had a great boss, a guy named Jim Crutchfield, who changed my life in every way. And really, in spite of the fact that I was an introvert, he taught me how did you actually become a salesperson without having to be pushy and aggressive. And that was the first step for me. It wasn't the major step. The major step came later when I actually began to understand that the customer mattered. And it took me probably 6 or 7 years to get that notion. But I never liked being pushy and aggressive. And when I read Ron Willingham's book, Integrity Selling, and he talked about the customer, I realized the customer was important. But what really put me over the edge was a book that I read by Roger Staubach, who's an ex-Dallas Cowboy, and his book changed my life because he said in his book, chances are you'll be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of two things: the people you meet and the books you read. The person who won't read is truly no better off than the person who can't read. Wow. And when I read that, I had been out of college 10 years. I read 3 books. I read Jaws. I read QB7 by Leon Uris. In anticipation of moving to New Jersey, I read The Godfather, which actually turned out to be a smart thing to do. But from that day forward, I've read 569 business books, and I've written 4 bestsellers. I've read one book 69 times. And so much of my expertise comes from exactly what Staubach said. It's the people I've met, the Gittimers of the world, the books that I've read. And so that's really basically the genesis of my expertise, was just studying.
You have a great rhyme that you use. If you want to sell what?
To sell Jane Brown what Jane Brown buys, you have to see the world through Jane Brown's eyes.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that if you're going to try and get someone to buy in, and my bias, the reason I wrote the book, Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer, I'll never forget, I was sitting on an airplane, I was reading Jeffrey Gitomer's book, The Little Red Book of Sales Answers, which I think is Jeffrey's best book. Now, I'm a big Jeffrey Gitomer fan. I get his newsletter every week. He's phenomenal. But he said something that really changed me. He said, people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. And I remember reading that on a plane saying, well, if people hate to be sold, why are we teaching people how to sell? If I don't like having this done to me, why am I teaching somebody to do it? And then I said, well, maybe we should teach people how to get the customer to buy in, which is a completely different concept. So if I want to get Jane Brown to buy in, I have to see the world through Jane Brown's eyes. And my experience is most salespeople stop 1, 2, or 3, 4 questions short of full understanding because they're in such a hurry to get their product message out.
Right.
And my belief is that until I truly understand not only what you say, but what you mean by what you say, it's probably not in my best interest to try and advance my agenda. Let me tell you a quick story. Sure. I was at a very large company, and I walked in, and they had a product that was $200 million behind its forecast. And they asked me to come in because our business is helping companies sell stuff that's hard to sell. And I asked them before we started, there were 7 people from the marketing team, and I said, can I ask you some questions before we get started? And the brand director said, I thought we were here to see a capabilities presentation. I said, well, that's a bad idea. He said, why? And I said, because why would I tell you how great we are if I have no idea whether we can help you? Mm-hmm. I said, what I would prefer to do is ask you questions for 15 minutes, in which case you're going to know whether I can help you or not. And if I can help you, you're going to get 45 minutes of your meeting back. If I can help you, because you're $200 million behind forecast, you ain't going to want to leave this room. And But you'll never know that if I don't. And even if I find out I can help you, I'm not going to show you capabilities presentation. I'm going to refer you to people that have done business with us before. So I left there with a $750,000 order.
Wow.
And that we took that product from an 18 share to 52 in 9 months.
That's amazing.
But we understood the customer like they didn't.
So, and one of the things that you do is ask great questions.
Right.
Why are questions so important to selling?
Well, questions are fascinating because there are 5 things that happen in a sales call. I don't care who you are, right? You got to open the call. You got to ask questions to discover. You got to tell the story. You got to answer questions or objections, and you got to ask for the business. Questions can be used and should be used in every one of those. And so they transcend the individual component of a sales call. The other thing is that the only possible way to guarantee what I call mental self-inquiry is to ask a question. And great salespeople are terrific at getting the other customer to think differently. And so if I want to get the other customer to think differently, then I have to ask questions in a way that makes them see the world differently. Now, that means I need to prepare for the question. And the biggest problem that people have is they don't understand the architecture of a question. What we teach people is that there's a framework to asking a great question. It's not very complex. Anybody can learn it. But it really starts with your mindset of saying, I'm curious and I really want to understand. And once you get that mindset, rather than I'm here to sell you, the questions become easier to ask.
Well, I think sometimes you meet a life insurance salesperson at a cocktail party, and they instantly start talking to you about life insurance, and your guard goes up. You're just like, you can't get out of the room fast enough. What's that guy doing wrong?
Well, he's signaling to you or me that he's product focused and not customer focused. And so one of the things I tell people all the time, the mind doesn't work unless it's open. That's not a very complex idea. But salespeople inadvertently, and I think unintentionally, they close the mind. And so if you make me feel like you're trying to sell me something, I immediately think that you're biased. And none of us like biased people. None of us. I don't care who you are. And I don't care what the bias is. And so what you're doing is signaling that you're biased. What I signaled to that customer was, I don't know whether I can help you or not. So I'm not biased. And frankly, if I can't help you, then I'm wasting your time and you're wasting mine. I didn't say that, but the truth is they were. And so I start out, and I think probably the most famous thing I ever said is, the less you care about the sale, the more you sell.
Wow.
So
explain that.
Well, what you care about is, are you any good at finding out what the customer really wants? Are you any good at sharing your product or service story so that people can connect what you want and what you need with what you have? And if you're good at that, they'll buy if that is the right thing for them to do. If it's not the right thing for them to do, they shouldn't buy.
You and I have talked off the air about the idea that the next generation of salesperson is woefully, unequipped to do the job. Not only because they're not teaching it in school, but sometimes they're not learning it at work either.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the number of sales programs there are out there, so many of them are product focused. So many of them are around being pushy and aggressive. The challenge is there's way more people in sales that are either introverted, shy, or really don't want to be pushy and aggressive. And so a lot of people don't even want to be in sales. My daughter, she didn't want to be in sales, but I kept saying, Laura, you have the wrong definition of selling. If you get the right definition of selling, almost anybody can sell anything that they believe in. And so the problem we have is that we're not giving people the right definition of selling. We're not teaching people how do you set and achieve stretch goals in college. We're not teaching people how do you build a meaningful network that works for you, that gets people to want to talk to you, to buy from you, to listen to you. We're not teaching those skills in school. Now, we're teaching people about technology, and I ultimately think technology is going to change the world. I think the millennial generation is one of our great hopes, because once they figure out that the best relationships start with human contact, and then they marry their incredible mindset about innovation and technology, we're going to get some incredible things. We already have. I mean, look at the things that Zuckerberg has done, to change the world. So I think the key is, get the right definition of mindset, understand what it takes to set and achieve stretch goals, and certainly understand how do you build a network that works for you. Because if 70% of every job you're going to get the rest of your life is going to come from your network. To not understand that and build that network proactively so it works for you is criminal.
Do you think that sometimes people who are being sold just sense that this person is looking at me as a wallet or a purse, and they don't really even care about me as a person?
Oh, I think it's transparent. The second chapter of my book is intent is everything. And I think you signal your intent when you're talking to a customer. And your intent is either going to be, I'm unbiased or I'm biased. There's no gray area there. And so if I signal that I'm biased, I may make a sale, but I'm going to make a far lower percentage of sales than someone who truly isn't unbiased, who's only looking for people where their product or service is a good fit. And the reason that works is because that person never feels that you're trying to sell them. Right. I used to tell every one of my customers, and I teach my customers now, if you want to make sure that this customer doesn't think you're biased, here's how you start every call. It's very simple. I'm not 100% sure whether our stuff is right for you or not. And the truth is you aren't. If you look in the pharmaceutical business, which is a business that I come from, the number one product in the world is $1 billion a month.
Wow.
It has a 38 share. That means 62% of the people in the world do not get this product. So you could be working on the number one product in the world and say, not majority of people don't need our product. So it's not like you're trying to kid anybody. You're just trying to be honest.
We've got about 2 minutes left in this segment. So talk about the relationship piece. Why is that so important?
Well, the relationship is important, number one, because it is the single biggest predictor of job security and your ability to get opportunity than anything, because so many of the jobs you're going to get come from your network. The other reason is that there's only two reasons people listen to us. And in almost every thing that we do where we're trying to be influential or persuasive, we want the other person to listen. When I have a relationship with you, as I do you, I listen to you differently. When you say something to me, I process that as Jeff Crilley and not as that person. And so the value of the relationship is it gets me to listen to you differently when we have what I call a valuable business relationship.
Yes.
I listen to what you say because I value you, and I value you because I know you, I believe in you, and I trust in you. And that's why it creates such incredible power.
And if you're truly a good salesman or saleswoman, you want a relationship so that the sales process goes on over and over and it's not a one and done.
No, exactly. You want these people to see you as a resource, not as a pain in the butt.
Jerry, you're amazing. You're going to have to come back again. Give us your website.
It's jerryacuff.com.
Awesome. And we'll be right back.